This is Roger Corman, and you're listening to FilmWax Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Adam Chartoff, your host of FilmWax Radio, and this is episode number 415. Well, this is a great episode. I know I say that pretty much all the time, but this one, I mean it this time. We have on an author, we have on a filmmaker, we have on a cinematographer. It's a fun episode. We have a very, very, just a diverse group of people on this particular episode, and so I think you'll really enjoy it. We're going to start off with my friend Karyn Parsons. Now, you may recall that name. Karyn Parsons, as you know, she portrayed the character Hilary Banks on the sitcom The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air from 1990 to 96. And she's on FilmWax Radio. She also, by the way, just so you know, happens to be married to filmmaker Alexander Rockwell, who has been on this podcast a couple of times. And I invited Karyn on because she's raising money for a wonderful cause on Kickstarter, and we'll get to that in a minute. And then we're going to have on the author Glenn Frankel, who wrote a wonderful book about the classic Western The Searchers some years ago, and he's back with a relatively new book called High Noon, The Hollywood Blacklist, and the Making of an American Classic, which is currently available right now. I mean, you can get it. And it's a wonderful interview. You know, I love having authors on the podcast because I always love getting a new book. I get to read a new book and then interview the author. What's better than that? Not a whole lot, I could tell you. It's a treat. And Glenn is one of my favorite guests. He's just terrific. And we get to discuss High Noon, one of the most famous films ever made, and the Red Scare of the 1950s, which is also a fascinating subject and one I'm very interested in. So that was great. So we're going to have Glenn on. And then if that were enough, Karyn Parsons and Glenn Frankel, we have on this episode Steven Bernstein, who is one of the great cinematographers coming out of Hollywood. So I'm going to mention two films that he's most known for, and one is Monster with Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci, and then, of course, like Water for Chocolate. So if you'll be just surprised by the breadth and scope of this man's work. He's not only a cinematographer, by the way, he's also a director and an actor, and he just has worn more hats than most people, so I'm glad to bring on Steven Bernstein. Anyway, that's all on episode number 415 of FilmWax Radio. So what we're going to do is we're going to go first into Karyn Parsons. Now, she is raising money for a new short film. It's an animated children's short, part of a series that she's doing under the rubric of Sweet Blackberry, which is a nonprofit, and they're raising money to bring the stories of lesser-known African-American people to children, okay? So the latest one here, we're going to go into in a moment here, is the latest animated short film called The Bessie Coleman Story, and it's narrated by Lawrence Fishburne. Now, we need to raise a little money, okay? Currently, Karyn has over half of the money raised, okay? She needs to raise $50,000 by July 20th, which is about, 2 weeks away? Okay, so she's already raised close to $27,000. And Bessie Coleman is the first African-American woman to become a pilot, to get her international pilot's license, okay? So it's an intriguing, great story. Again, narrated by Larry Fishburne. This is I think the fourth short that they've done. With the other ones, you'll hear all about them, but they include Henry Box Brown, Dancing in the Light, and Garrett's Gift. This is, again, the fourth one, the Bessie Coleman Story. So you'll want to listen to this segment with Karyn, and then, consider kicking in a couple of bucks, okay? So let's do that. Let's go into my conversation with Karyn Parsons, and then we'll be back after that, okay? I was going to say, I was going to do a Kickstarter, too, which I've been putting on for like a year or two, and they were very excited that I was doing it.
Why'd you put it off?
Because you need a solid amount of time where you can dedicate a lot of your energy and resource.
Ready.
Yeah, you can't do it unless you know, like, okay, easily I can raise like the majority of it without very much input.
Right,
People are going to just toss money my way. There aren't too many people like that.
I don't know. Yeah.
I
don't know.
So
those.
you have to be on. You have to personally reach out to just about everybody. I mean, to now
Everyone
in your
you know.
case, this is we're talking Karyn Parsons, of course, who is an actress, a writer, a producer. Did you? Right, yeah. You with these animated shorts that you're now raising the money for the fourth one?
Yes, this is our fourth one.
You wrote them?
Yeah, I write them.
And you produce them.
And I produce them, exactly. I don't do the illustrations.
No, I know you don't.
But I do write them.
Is it the same illustrator each one? It looks like
yes,
Garrett's.
It's the same, yeah, from Garrett's Gift, and the last one, Dancing in the Light, the Janet Collins story. Mm-hmm. His name's R. Gregory Christie.
He's really good.
He's an incredible Coretta Scott King award-winning illustrator.
Is that good?
Book. He does, lots of children's books. For children's book illustration.
Okay.
And he's pretty phenomenal. Yeah.
Have you done it? Have you had it to a Kickstarter? It's like an old joke. It's like, what time is it? And then,
it's not vodka, that's water.
I got a little on the floor. Is that okay?
It's okay. No, it's water. Don't worry about it.
All right. I can't hold my water.
Be careful. Literally.
Mess today. Have you done a Kickstarter for each of the short films?
I did a Kickstarter for the Janet Collins story, the last one, but that was it. That was the first time I did one. Mm-hmm. And now I'm doing this one for the Bessie Coleman story.
Right. Who is the first African-American female pilot, I think.
That's correct. She's the first black female pilot in the world. And the first black pilot to get an international pilot's license, male or female.
International. So
international. And that was in 1922.
That's really
when
remarkable.
They wouldn't let no one would teach a black woman to fly in the U.S. And so she ended up learning a little bit of French.
Oh.
And went to France, saved up her money, and got help from a sponsor, and went to France and learned in Paris how to fly.
It really is a remarkable story.
It is a remarkable story. It's pretty crazy.
It is kind of crazy, but all this falls under the rubric of Sweet Blackberry. Is that it's an organization that you created to tell?
It's a nonprofit organization.
Okay, and you founded it?
I founded it.
And the mission is to bring lesser-known stories of African Americans to children.
Yeah, right. Because in schools, I think we learn about a handful of stories generally. Great stories. Mm-hmm. George Washington Carver, the Peanut Guy, and Frederick Douglass.
Right. The usual suspects.
Yeah, and they're amazing stories.
Harriet Tubman.
No doubt. Harriet Tubman. But there are so many more stories out there. And my mother was a librarian, and she headed the Black Resource Center where she worked, and she would come across really interesting stories. And she told me the story. She told me a lot of stories, but she told me the story of Henry Box Brown.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it was an enslaved man, had a box built.
Right, he FedExed himself.
He FedExed himself.
If only there was at the time, it would have been a lot faster.
Mailed himself to freedom.
I was thinking
across
about
state lines.
Karen, you're going to be a little impressed because I have this sort of, I don't know if it's OCD or if it's due diligence essentially, but I really try to be prepared.
Yeah.
If I talk to you, I kind of know.
Great.
So I watched all the films.
You watched them all?
I watched them all.
Wow, okay.
Because I wanted to know what it was about, and I wasn't familiar. And then, they're all available, by the way. Of course, the fourth one hasn't.
Yeah, the fourth one hasn't
been made yet. But the other three have, and they're available on Netflix, FYI. So go check them out with your kids. Mm-hmm. So I watched them all. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is really incredible. Henry, like, even if the box was, he mailed himself to Washington, but he made it to Philadelphia.
He watched himself to Philadelphia. Philadelphia.
Okay, I thought there was they was supposed to go to Washington.
No, he was in Virginia.
Oh, okay.
And he mailed himself. His destination was Pennsylvania.
I forget. Was he coordinating with anybody?
Yeah. Now, in reality, that's the whole story. Now, these stories are geared toward a younger audience, so it's and they're short animated films, so you don't get every little thing in there. So, but the way it actually went down is it was coordinated with someone and that helped build the box, and there was someone who would meet him on the other side and open the box. It wasn't just some random person who's like, "Oh, this is really cool. Who's this for?"
It's funny because we mentioned Harriet Tubman, or I did, who of course was one of the people who was given credit for creating the Underground Railroad.
Right.
I think she made one of probably several people, but I don't know. But he kind of discovered this alternative, which was,
Well, I guess this is really considered part of the Underground Railroad, as I think, because it's a whole thing. It's a whole community of people who had coordinated, ways to get people. I mean, not literally an Underground Railroad, but,
Garrett's gift was about the African American who actually invented the traffic signal, of course, which traffic was never the same again.
No.
In fact, he's responsible for there being traffic.
It's all Garrett's fault. He invented among other things. There are a lot of things he invented, but I think for our audience, the thing that made the most sense to tell the story of was the traffic signal, because our young viewers are at that age where they're like, oh, this is something I know.
Sure. Cars and trucks are always exciting.
This is what I'm dealing with right now, is when to step off the curb and when not to.
Yeah.
So, and I also wanted to focus on that story. I liked the idea of, because finding a way into the story is sometimes tricky, because you can find really incredible people in history but you don't know how to tell their story to kids. Or they've had great achievements, but how do you find the story? With Garrett, I mean, some of them are easy, like Henry Box Brown, The Man in the Box, and Traveling. That seems a little bit more straightforward. But Garrett Morgan, I was like, okay, this is a great contribution, but where's the story? And as I read, I found, he was one of many, many children. He had a huge family, like 14 or something. I forgot, like a lot of kids. And I thought I really wanted to focus on the fact that he was a kid who got into a lot of trouble because of his creative energy and not having a focus for it.
Well, this is something a lot of kids can relate to.
And we know a lot of kids like that. And I thought, God, it's a very familiar kind of story. So if that's what Garrett's, if we focus on that a little bit, and so that's what that story was. And then he finds the big city and all of the traffic, and nobody's really making any sense of it.
Right.
All the new cars on the road and all of that. So anyway, that's how that came to be. That story.
See. And then there was the dancer.
Yeah, Janet Collins.
Janet Collins, she was
the first black prima ballerina.
Okay.
She was asked. I mean, the story with Janet was another one that was kind of I knew what the story was right away, because when I first heard about her, I read her obituary in the New York Times. That's how I first found out. And she's another one of these people. She is one in particular where nobody seems to knew who she was.
Right.
And she was so groundbreaking, but no one knew who Janet Collins was. She was asked by the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, the Russian ballet, to dance at an unprecedented time, and she had to turn it down because they asked her to they said, you can only do it if you do it in whiteface.
Right.
And she was devastated. She was only 15 at the time. But she said no, but she worked really hard and went on to become the first black prima ballerina, the first regular black performer at the Metropolitan Opera before Marian Anderson sang there. And she won the Donaldson Award, which signified Best Dancer on Broadway. She just was like breaking ground left and right, and was just really renowned. When I did the campaign before, Misty Copeland donated ballet slippers, which she did for this campaign as well. But she donated ballet slippers, and I spoke to her when I picked up the slippers from her. And, of course, Misty Copeland knew who Janet Collins was, because she's like, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her.
Well, that always seems to be the way it is. It's not unusual that the pioneer, the one that broke ground, gets lost in the pages of the history, but the subsequent are able to enjoy the fruit.
Exactly.
But it's great, of course, when they do give due to...
Misty was very quick to want to say a few words to the Kickstarter backers and to everyone about Janet Collins, because I think she felt very much she owed a debt to her, and she wants people to know about her,
Yeah. Well, if these stories sound as fascinating as they actually are, when I do that, I talk to the audience. I'm sorry, I'm looking right at you. Then go to Kickstarter and search under either Sweet Blackberry or Karyn Parsons. That's Karyn Parsons, and you can look up the newest, this new campaign, which you're already halfway there, just about. I mean,
we're just short of the halfway mark. We need people to, and then my whole thing is with Kickstarter is if people can give anything. You know, if you can give the big amount, great. But if you can give us $1, everybody helps.
Every bit, of course, always, of course. And the goal is 50,000, and the goal date is the 20th of July. So that's why we're gonna try to help during this, what is usually the slump period of any Kickstarter.
Well, and this is strangely, I did this last time. I did the campaign during the 4th of July weekend. That was in the middle as well.
You know, but I've talked to Dan Schoenbrunn, who used to be a film lead. I mean, now David Nin, who is a friend, and there's a couple of other people I know. And they always say to me, it doesn't matter. If you keep waiting for the right period, I said, well, I'm going to wait till Sundance is over so everybody's home, and then before South by, and they go,
never a time.
You could do it, but it really, it doesn't. There's never going to be a right time.
Yeah.
Where you're going to have 4 to 6 weeks, whatever your length of your campaign is, So it's the Bessie Coleman story, and it's narrated by Lawrence Fishburne. Who was once in a film called Apocalypse Now, but I don't think he's done much since. So it's very nice of you
to give him some work.
To throw him a little work.
Yeah.
Take pity on the guy.
Yeah.
That's nice. And also, let's mention, because you have quite a track record, like you've had Queen Latifah on the...
Garrett's Gift.
On Garrett's Gift.
She narrated Garrett's Gift.
And then who was on the Henry Box Brown? That was
Alfre Woodard.
Alfre Woodard.
She narrated the first one. Yeah,
she's terrific. Then also some
Chris
comic
Rock.
stand-up guy who
he's
a stand-up guy.
Chris Rock guy.
So you have an amazing. It's an amazing group of people.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate to be able to bring some really good talent on board.
Yeah. So do you see this as something that's just you're going to keep going?
I have so many more stories to tell, and it's really...
Do you know what you would do already? Do you have, stuff on the back burner?
I have a lot of stories. I mean, it changes sometimes because, Bessie Coleman, for instance, I've wanted to do from the beginning. But then I was reluctant for a while because there was more stuff on her, and I'm really trying to get it out there, the stories that you don't hear about so much. But then I would talk to so many people that had no idea who she was, and so I thought, that's crazy. I'm gonna do her, and I think she's such an inspiration to me. So I'm excited to do her, and I think Lawrence Fishburne's great. But the whole thing with Sweet Blackberry too is, I really want kids. These are stories that risk being lost, and that's one thing that's really important, is to get them out there for that reason. But I think the biggest thing is I want all kids to understand that these tremendous obstacles are actually opportunities for greatness. That they look at these challenges these people overcame and what they were able to do. And I think that inspiration for kids is really important. And I think now more than ever, with what we've been going through politically, and how much it's making a lot of children feel very small and confused, and adults too. But I think to empower kids is probably more important than ever, to remind them of what they are capable of. And I think that's what these stories help do. Yeah.
Well, they are, and they are also happen to be very entertaining.
Yep. That's the whole point too.
Yeah, and they look great.
I hated history as a kid.
Oh, really?
I did. Because it was always all really serious and everyone was very
ancient.
stern.
What did this have to do with your life?
Yeah,
But if you can give it...
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was always felt like it had nothing to do with anything I could relate to. It was so abstract.
Right.
But I wanted to be able to bring them like fairy tales to kids so they were fun and engaging, and they just happened to be real people. I wanted to bring them to kids that way. And and I go around to schools across the country, and I screen them, and I talk to the kids and stuff, and it's really, really, really fun, and they're received
in auditoriums around the country.
What?
In school auditoriums around the country?
In school auditoriums. I've been to many auditoriums.
I bet. But the sound is always so bad.
Yeah, well, they haven't quite got that down yet.
Maybe newer schools have worked out the acoustics, but the old schools.
Most of them are
horrific.
Are the same old auditorium you remember?
Yeah, exactly. And you walk in there, and it's like, it's assembly.
Yeah,
must be Thursday.
It must be Thursday.
White shirt, button down on, and color guard, whatever it is. Did we cover it?
I hope so. I think
so,
we got it all in there. I just want to make sure people know to go to you can go to sweetblackberry.org and you can, and right on the front will be the Kickstarter. page to click on, or if you go to like you said before, Kickstarter, and you put in Sweet Blackberry, you'll find us. And I just really want to encourage people to push it out on social media, tell your friends about it if you think it's interesting, but also encourage people to donate, because it is a worthy cause. But donate whatever you can. I think a lot of people are like shy of doing it because they say, "Oh, I don't really have any money." But I'm telling you, $1 helps. Right. Or if you want to forego that frappuccino for one day,
go to the bodega one day instead of Starbucks or whatever. You can send the difference to the kids. To Sweetberry. Yeah, the kids will benefit from
stories to the kids. And it makes a difference.
Again, go to the website sweetblackberry.org or to Kickstarter. And again, it's we're trying to raise about $50,000 or $50,000 by July the 20th. Yeah. So. Check it out. July
20th. So the sooner you can do it, the better. And the sooner you can get your friends to do it, too, the better. And we'll get this great film together with Lawrence Fishburne out by February of next year.
Ooh, okay.
Yay.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Well, thank you. It was nice to finally sit down with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Now, let's go into conversation with Glenn Frankel, who is the author of a number of books, but most recently, currently available, High Noon, The Hollywood Blacklist, and The Making of an American Classic. You can order this book online now or purchase it at your local independent bookstore, whatever pleases you, but it is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Powell's, Politics. It's universally available, and it's a great, great book. I enjoyed reading it thoroughly. Okay, just so you know. I want to thank everybody over at Bloomsbury, USA for helping Glenn and I meet up and knock out this particular conversation. So here we go. This is my conversation with Glenn Frankel and his book about the classic Western, High Noon.
At home, Americans feared red subversion. Congress revived the House Committee on Un-American Activities. In 1947, the committee investigated Hollywood, factory of America's imagination.
Ever observed any communistic information in any scripts?
Well, I have turned down quite a few scripts because I thought they were tinged with communistic ideas. They haven't attempted to use me, I don't think, because apparently they know that I'm not very sympathetic to communism.
There has been a small group within the Screen Actors Guild which has consistently opposed the policy of the Guild board and officers or the Guild itself as evidenced by the vote on various issues. That small clique has been referred to, has been discussed as more or less following the tactics that we associate with the Communist Party.
If I had my way about it, they'd all be sent back to Russia or some other unpleasant place.
You grew up in Rochester.
So they escaped to Rochester. At the time, it seemed like a very distant thing, and that's where I grew up. But I went to Columbia, so I came back to New York in the late 60s.
I see. Okay. And did you stay down here for a time? Or
I was at Columbia, and then I worked at the Museum of Modern Art in the very exalted position of clerk typist. Back in the days when, the MoMA had all these 16-millimeter films, classic films that they would rent to high schools and colleges.
Oh, right. Well, they have an archive, so it makes sense.
Yeah, but, so the clerk typist would arrange to send out the 16 copies of, Birth of a Nation all over the country. Took 2 weeks, unless you had a rush order. Then 2 weeks to get back, and then it would go out to the next place and the next place. And it was a huge operation with forklifts and, to get these things in and out. And this is all gone now, of course. Nobody needs to do any of this. But I worked there for a while and got to watch an incredible number of films. Met John Lennon and Yoko Ono, met Warren Beatty and Julie Christie.
On the screen.
No, they came by.
I imagine.
They came by.
Right.
We didn't have a close personal relationship, but
Wow, as a young man, that must have been very exciting.
It was a lot of fun, but my girlfriend had just gotten back from India, of all things, and she wanted to go to California. She wanted to go to San Francisco, so I up and quit and left. And that was the end of my film career until quite recently.
I understand. More of a Zen thing going on the West Coast at the time.
Well, more of a, she wanted, I'd never been to California.
Right. Oh, okay. And, so it was like a little bit, from Rochester to the Bay Area. Yeah. Quite a change for you.
It was, to see a beautiful city.
Yeah.
I'd never really seen a beautiful city before, geographically. I mean, the mountains in the distance and the ocean and all that.
Yeah.
So we never got back to New York, really, and ended up eventually in the newspaper business because I wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out that newspapers paid you to write, and that if I was going to be a writer, I had to get paid, or I wouldn't be a writer. So, anyway.
So you got married to this girl?
Eventually. So we had a couple of kids and hung out together for many years. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then,
so I'm sure your parents were they were like, what is he doing?
They had a lot of questions about a lot of things, and I had very few answers.
Rochester is a great place. It's a lot of history up there. But it's a kind of it's conventional in the
it's
in
Midwestern.
The mind thinking. It is Midwestern.
And
you may as well
sound
be
Midwestern. Apple, and the way we talk. And
you're 3 or 4 hours from New York City, but you may as well be in the middle of
It's very different.
Yeah, it's very true.
And they, that's what they wanted. I liked Rochester, but I like New York better.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have you in New York today, and I know that even though this is probably not going to make it on time to promote properly, although I did already send a tweet out this morning about your upcoming Film Forum appearance on Sunday. For those listening, this will be in the past now because I can't work quite that quickly. I would like to have. But Glenn is joining Gary Cooper's daughter, whose name is Maria Cooper-Janis, in a Q&A where they will be taking questions, as Q&A implies. But so that's great. And I'm sure you've made appearances before. Or her from
I met her when I was working on the book. Yeah. For someone who grew up in Hollywood in this very elevated kind of weird life with other movie kids and all that, she turns out to be a lovely, normal, in the best sense of the word, very gracious, warm person, and it was just a pleasure. I spent 3 or 4 hours with her, and she loves her father.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah,
and really respects him and admires him, and it was just great to talk to her. But she's also an adult, and she's quite aware of the situations her father was in, and just a really warm, friendly person. It was a real pleasure. In the case of all the main characters that I write about in the book, I was able to meet someone of this generation who, a child, a widow in 2 cases because both Carl Foreman and Stanley Kramer married later in life much younger women, so they're still around. And this was the way, all the main people I wrote about have long passed away.
And Fred's son, Tim.
Fred Zinnemann's son, Tim, exactly.
Right.
So I had sort of surrogates who knew these people in a very intimate way.
Well, that's the advantage of doing a book from a time that's, even though it feels like it's a really long time ago, it really isn't. It's, and in the same regard, you think about how distant the Red Scare, which your book is about, feels like it is, but it's not. You don't have to go that far back, 60-some years ago. Right now, it doesn't feel so
Well, I was going to say, exactly. There is a special resonance, sadly, between that era and this one. A time of great political anxiety, personal anxiety, the sense, we were locked in this lethal nuclear arms race. The Soviet Union had just gotten the A-bomb. FDR was gone, and his replacement, Harry Truman, was, a decent man, but certainly not the comforting father figure that FDR had been. And even though we'd won the World War II, we were now locked into this other struggle. In the summer, by September of 1951, which is really the heart of the book, we'd lost something like 83,000 Americans had been killed or wounded in Korea.
Right. So
it's enormous, enormous
and maybe
toll.
it was just coming out of World War II not that long before. So there was already this special level of protectiveness of losing more Americans. So to not wait around and to label who the enemy was seemed to be, in other words, we didn't waste any time with the hatred of communists maybe was going through an average American's mind at the time.
Well, as I say, the anxiety level was incredibly high. It was exploited by politicians.
Yeah.
There was a search for outsiders or enemies who could be blamed, enemies within the country.
Why would that? Just because? What would have been the politicians' benefit?
Just like today, it serves your purpose to have a target, to have someone you can say who's secretly hurting us, and they're the cause of our problems. Back then, it was commies. Jews, to an extent, liberals. Today it's immigrants and Muslims and undocumented workers, refugees. I mean, that's the nature, the sort of brutal nature of politics, not just in the States, but, I worked in Europe for a long time, and you see it there, too, finding the outsider, someone you can hold responsible for your problems. The last time I spent considerable time in Europe, I was the Washington Post London bureau chief from 2002 to 2006. Okay. And people there were always, making fun of the States and our, kind of messed up politics and our, religious fanaticism and all that around politics. But, when it came to tolerance of outsiders and to welcoming people, we didn't always do a very good job here, but at least we have an ideology that the country is, welcoming the huddled masses and all that. Yeah. In Europe, they didn't have that at all, and there was no sense.
They were the huddled masses over here.
So. Yeah, I mean, so in France, the idea that Muslims from Algeria could be Frenchmen, they would have to give up their identity as Muslims, their identity as outsiders, or else they weren't welcome. There was no way, and you end up huddled in these little distant suburbs. Yeah. And then no wonder, sooner or later they explode. So there wasn't that ideology of tolerance and acceptance in a country built by immigrants. And at least we have that here. I admit it's frayed and lately exploited in ways politically that it hasn't been done maybe since the 1920s. But there it is. And the country likes to think of itself as open and generous. But all that's under threat now, and so in a lot of ways, the Blacklist and the Red Scare has a lot of resonance today.
It does. Glenn Frankel is the author of High Noon. Is there a subtitle?
Yes, it's called The Hollywood Blacklist and the Making of an American Classic.
That's right. We're talking about High Noon, 1952, right in the middle of the Red Scare. Yeah. It came out. Right? We'd say maybe the Red Scare, or that particular Red Scare, because there was actually a prior one. The one where Hollywood was greatly involved was, let's say, roughly mid-40s to mid-50s.
Yeah, I mean, the House Un-American Activities Committee first comes to Hollywood in 1947, and that's the famous hearings that ended up with the indictment of the Hollywood 10 for contempt of Congress for refusing to cooperate. So that happens in 47. Eventually, those guys go to jail for up to a year. In 51, they're all out of jail, and the committee decides it's a great time to go for a sequel. And it's really 51 and 52 that then becomes the height of the Hollywood Blacklist. Meanwhile, Senator McCarthy's just getting going on the other house. But this is HUAC, and this is and these particular ones are looking at culture, looking at institutions like schools and labor unions.
Hollywood was ripe for that then, because after all, it was built, in a sense, all the major studios were run by Eastern European Jewish immigrants, right? Almost without exception. And then not long after, or during that same period of World War II, many German filmmakers had to leave Europe for their safety and move to Hollywood. So there were quite a bunch of...
Yeah, there were a lot of outsiders, a lot of immigrants. I mean, the studio heads themselves, who you're right, I mean, basically the people who founded Hollywood way back, they were generally politically conservative. They're not the way we think of American Jews now as, high profile, pro-Israel out there. We know about Steven Spielberg's politics and other folks. These guys weren't like that. They kept a low profile. They themselves were conflicted about their Jewish identity.
Only too happy to adapt and adopt America.
Desperate to adapt America, and yet they were also forming American culture. Nothing, we might forget these days because Hollywood isn't what it used to be. the movies just were this great new technology that dominated our popular culture, came out of nowhere, and really took it over for a long, long time. And that made them both incredibly powerful and rich, but also made them a very high-profile target for anyone who came along who was looking. So the committee goes to Hollywood in part for the same reasons everyone went to Hollywood, to get famous, to have a platform, to have movie stars testify and get a big audience. It's a target-rich environment.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg here? Did you think that you wanted to tell the story of the Red Scare in Hollywood? Did you think that it was not a subject that was told very much, or did you feel like Gary Cooper was the subject of the film? Because you oscillate between those two subjects in a way until, of course, they converge with the making of High Noon. Whether or not it's a parable or not is you suggest it is indeed. One can draw from it what they want. But which came first?
Kind of the chicken and the egg went together. To be honest, I just published a book about John Ford's great Western, The Searchers, starring John Wayne, and I was at the University of Texas, and we had a little film series, Western film series, and I did Searchers, and then a colleague of mine who's in the radio, TV, film department, and who actually is a film studies person. He actually knows about a lot of movies. I know about 2 movies now, Searchers and High Noon. Anyway,
those are 2 good ones, though.
Well, they're good ones to know. Well, his name is Charles Ramirez Berg. He's a fabulous professor, and he did an event on High Noon. And then Charles not only talked about the Blacklist and Carl Foreman, the screenwriter, and what happened, but he also made the case that it was a great movie. I always loved High Noon, but it's not that high on the critics' pantheon. It's not never in the top 10 or anything.
It's rarely ever,
And Fred Zinnemann Fred Zinnemann, the director, is not considered a famous auteurist.
Right.
But
certainly not in the same breath with John Ford and Howard Hawks.
Not at all. But Charles made a pretty good case for it, and I can make one now too. And so, to me, it all came together. The real question I had to answer is, do I want to do another movie book? Because I'm really not a movie book guy. But I thought about it. I looked around to see if anyone else had done it. It had been the great Hollywood Blacklist books are Victor Navasky's Naming Names, in my opinion, and The Political Inquisition in Hollywood, which is by Larry Sapler and Stephen England. Both came out in 1980. There have been some great memoirs since then, personal stories, but there hasn't been that much an overall look at how the Hollywood Blacklist functioned. A lot of papers have been disclosed by HUAC in the years since 1980. Turned out I was in kind of an interesting field where, although many things have been written and many good books, somebody like me coming in from the outside and just looking at doing original research, there was original research to be done. So I never thought in terms of the movie or the Blacklist. I always felt them going arm in arm together. And as you suggest, I toggle back and forth between them. They're happening simultaneously. Carl Foreman, the basic creator of High Noon, the screenwriter, gets a subpoena to testify about his former membership in the party, basically just before they're going to start shooting the film. He gets it in the summer, the subpoena in the summer of June, to be called in September, which will be the middle of the film shoot. So there was no question but that I could go on 2 tracks chronologically and just move back and forth between them.
Gary Cooper himself was not ever a member of the Communist Party. In fact, was an opponent. He was conservative.
A good right-wing Republican, absolutely.
Yeah. But on a personal or social level, more open-minded, more left-leaning in that sense.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say left-leaning, but I would say he functioned on personality.
He took people for who they were.
Exactly. He made his own decisions.
Quite so. Right. Okay. Very good. That kind of gives the story a nice amount of tension. What's Gary Cooper going to do? We'd like to think that he's going to do the right thing and not inform and support his friends and his colleagues.
Exactly.
Like Carl.
Well,
Foreman.
Cooper. When this movie was made, it's in 1951. Cooper's 50 years old. He's been in the business for 25 years. He's been a big star almost since the day he arrived in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But the studio system, and he's the ultimate product of the studio system, if you will, and making big money. But by the early 50s, the studio system is beginning to shake. It's fading. It's bloated. They're spending too much money. People aren't buying movie tickets the way they did.
During the war.
Television is beginning to come in there.
Right.
So Cooper is, and he's 50 years old, and he needs a break. His health isn't so good either in many ways. So when High Noon comes along, when this wonderful script, he jumps to do it, and he does it for less than half his normal salary. And he works closely with Zinnemann and Foreman, and he likes these guys because he knows they're doing something good. It's something creative. They're in a very small production company with Stanley Kramer. And so
it's great. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Glenn. I just wanted to make mention of the Stanley Kramer, let's say, storyline or thread through the book, because it's such a great. My audience is largely fans of the independent film world, so that's kind of where I operate, So it's interesting to see Stanley Kramer as possibly a pioneer of it.
He's their forerunner, really, in many ways.
Which goes into nice detail in your book.
Yeah, Stanley comes out of the war. He meets Foreman. These two guys are young Jewish intellectuals, fast-talking. They think they know exactly what's wrong with the studio system. And Stanley starts this little kind of nimble, in the current vernacular, agile little company that makes movies for less money. Great bunch of craftsmen involved in it, and punchy movies with some social content to them. And this is where High Noon comes from, the Stanley Kramer Company. And so Stanley is up for this. Carl is part of this. They've got great film editing. They've got Dmitri Tiomkin does most of their music. They're really when you think of film as a collaborative thing among craftsmen, Stanley Kramer really sort of paves the way for a lot of what we've seen since. And he makes his way. They sort of juke their way around between the studios, and they get hot. And they do well, and then the studios want to buy them or want to do deals with them.
It became attractive now to farm out because, like you were just mentioning before, there wasn't an endless supply of money anymore.
Right.
At this point, by early 50s.
And Stanley was making movies for about half the price of a studio.
And they were doing relatively well. But by and large,
they did some great movies. They were hot.
Yeah.
After Champion, little boxing movie with Kirk Douglas, that sets them off.
Right.
And they get 6 Academy Award nominations as well, for very little money. So people want to buy them. Howard Hughes holds a midnight meeting with Stanley.
It's as though the studios were too bloated. It's like they're too bloated to change on the fly. It's like there's too many people employed. There's too big productions. But to really do something that was economical seemed really difficult for a studio to pull off. So this was a great opportunity.
Well, exactly. So they were able to sneak in there and do a lot of cool things. And and that's why Cooper found them so attractive and was willing to work for less than half his usual studio salary. They gave him points so that when the movie succeeded, he made plenty of money off it. But he took a risk going with them. And it's the risk-taking aspect of it. We think of guys like Stanley Kramer from his 1960s movies, some of which are very good. But before he was that, he was this young sort of nimble entrepreneur, just sticking it to the studio system and making movies that are still worth watching, like The Men with Marlon Brando. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I have.
It's a terrific movie.
Yeah, worthy of a revisit, because it did not do well originally when it came out, according, again, to your book, but it holds up.
It holds up very well. Brando's wonderful. The supporting cast is great. The script is terrific. It's a complex little movie. Fred Zinnemann does a great job with it. It's very moving. It's very powerful. Doesn't have a happy ending. Very ambiguous as to where things are going to go. It's an honest movie with great actors.
Was America just kind of ready, or at least there seemed to be a certain percentage of the population of moviegoers that were ready for his types of films, this darker story, but with just such great craftsmanship and acting, and that it still was very satisfying from a film-going perspective.
Well, we're at the end of the war. After the war, the boys come home. After the incredibly traumatic experience, and they're kind of interested in not watching movies about movie stars clicking champagne glasses in penthouses,
and just musicals and that kind of
musicals and all that stuff. There's always a market for that stuff, and Singing in the Rain comes out around this time too.
Right.
But there is a market for grown-up movies about serious things. And that's what Stanley and Carl wanted to do. They weren't interested in that other stuff. They really, that was their mantra. They were young, they were very ambitious, but at the same time they had a social conscience. And this was a great thing for them.
The judge has left town, Harvey's quit, and I'm having trouble getting deputies.
People got to talk themselves into law and order before they do anything about it. Maybe because down deep they don't care. They just don't care.
I think you better go while there's still time. It's better for you, and it's better for us.
Amy.
I mean it. If you won't go with me now, I'll be on that train when it leaves here.
I've got to stay.
Why must you be so stupid, Will? Have you forgotten what he is? Have you forgotten what he's done to people? Have you forgotten that he's crazy? Don't you remember when he sat in that chair and said, "You'll never hang me, I'll come back. I'll kill you, Will Kane. I swear it, I'll kill you."
A terror-stricken town left him to face 4 killers, single-handed, at high noon. With every swing of the pendulum, with every second, a man's life ticked away.
So Cooper had already made, as we said, he was one of the big stars in Hollywood, but he had made a handful of films like we know him. Mr. D Goes to Town was much earlier, actually. It's 36. Yeah. That was like his one of his early real breakout. And then a few years later, Meet John Doe, Sergeant York. But it had been a little while. Is it safe to say before High Noon that he had
45 or 46, he was running out of gas.
Yeah.
The studio system was running out of gas.
He was no longer like the big stars with the
studio
popular
system
list
was,
makers.
Yeah.
I
mean, he still was a big box office.
Okay.
But he couldn't help but notice the scripts weren't as good. He wasn't working with a great director every time, like Hawks say. He couldn't direct himself. He couldn't write his own screenplays. He needed the system to function as smoothly as it functioned in the late 30s and early 40s, and it just was beginning to sputter. And he was getting very frustrated.
So as you said, he jumped at the chance when this came along.
Exactly.
So it makes a lot of sense, considering maybe there was a period of time right beforehand, and he was able to identify something that had that was going to be great for his legacy as well.
Yeah, he was just looking.
Do you think by that point he was more concerned with his legacy?
Who knows? He's only 50 years old.
He's so young, considering, right?
And we think of him as this old guy, and he actually looks older than 50.
Yeah, because you said he had health issues. He was a smoker, heavy smoker.
Yes, he was, and he had a bad back from childhood, actually, an ulcer. His marriage was falling apart. Cooper just was on all 3 counts: health, personal things, business. They all were just going a little bit sour for him, and he was looking for a break.
You mentioned other health issues. He had an ulcer or something. He had some other problems, and it was never quite healed properly.
Well, the ulcer. His back.
He had a hernia, I think, is what you said.
Yeah, he had a hernia. His back had been injured in a car accident when he was a kid, and it never healed properly, and now it was really bothering him. Hernia operation that summer. Ulcer, marriage going bad, tempestuous mistress, Patricia Neal, the beautiful Patricia Neal.
Right.
This guy was juggling a lot of stuff, and he was, he wasn't happy about a lot of it. And so High Noon to him was really a way of just, I don't think it was a legacy so much as just doing what he knew how to do with a bunch of people he respected and doing quality work and getting back to the basics of, acting.
That makes sense. Which kind of was like a foundation for him.
Yes.
And it made sense that would be also really, really appealing to him. And the cast was just outstanding. I mean, just an A-list of character actors, and Grace Kelly.
Exactly. When you look at the people in that movie, I mean, the 3 bad guys who were waiting for their boss to come to town, it's a guy named Robert Wilkie, Sheb Woolley, later known for being on Rawhide, the TV show, and also for the One-Eyed, One-Horned, Flying Purple People Eater novelty song.
Oh, that was him?
That's Sheb Woolley. And then Lee Van Cleef in his first movie. Right. And Van Cleef doesn't have a line in the whole movie. He's just standing there being Lee Van Cleef.
being menacing.
Being bored for an hour. Van Cleef, these guys in the shootout at the end, and they all reveal their personalities again. Sheb Wooley is impetuous, and, so he breaks into a store, and that sets off. The marshal realizes what's going on. Lee Van Cleef dashes in to try to kill the marshal in a barn, because I think he's been so bored in the last hour and a half, he just wants to force the action. But these three guys later were in lots of other Westerns. Robert Wilkie, that kind of sneering smile that he has. I don't know if you've seen Magnificent Seven, but it's a brief scene in the beginning where James Coburn, who's the knife-wielding member of the Seven, kills a guy in a gunfight where he's got the knife and the guy's got the gun. That's Robert Wilkie.
Oh, really?
Making a huge mistake. I think he played the same role in every one of these Westerns because of the way he looked. But anyway, they got these guys. They got the great Thomas Mitchell to play the mayor of the town who sells out the lawman. Katy Jurado, this wonderful young Mexican film star. And this is I think her second American movie, and her English isn't very good, but she's terrific in it. They really put the pieces together in a very professional way, and everybody's good.
Everything just sort of fit into place, it seemed like, with this film. And then people went to see it and loved it, correct?
That's very much true. The last part is the theme song, is this wonderful melodic, "Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling," which they used in a different way, and it's a different kind of song than almost in any other movie. The lyrics of the song narrate the feelings of the marshal as he faces this crisis.
Do not forsake me.
And they narrate it in a way that he himself can't articulate. Grace Kelly, the new bride, wants to know, why are you doing this? And he can't really explain it to her. If she'd gotten to listen to the theme song, she would understand it, because it's all there and it's addressed to her. Do not forsake me, oh my darling. So that was a very innovative way of using a movie theme. Also, they issued, Frankie Lane did a 45 version of it, and then Tex Ritter's version from the movie. They sold almost 2 million copies in the run-up to the release of the movie. So it set the stage for the movie, and so it's a very modern use of movie music. Every piece of this thing fit together well, and that's why it did so well, I think. It just drove it forward.
Audiences may have been more familiar with a song like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which essentially just tells the same story the movie does.
Yeah, but that's 10 years later.
Yeah,
that's
right.
This is the original. You had themes that were very haunting before then, like the theme from Laura, as time goes by, and Casablanca. There were some great songs, but this was a lyric tied to a character, to the main character, telling the story and being repeated half a dozen or more times in the course of the film. And the movie is edited to the rhythms of the song, the cuts, the changes. Quite, it fits together in a sort of beautiful package. So everything works.
And how much, I guess in your research, it's apparent in the book that, as we already said, since High Noon was produced during the middle of the Red Scare, this particular one, that the script was a subtle parable for essentially a man standing up to not only bullies, but also to those who turn their back, those who refuse to get involved and turn away in a man's time of need.
Yeah, I think Carl's theme of a man going through a journey where he recognizes that he's on his own. He thinks he's part of a community, and he assumes that when trouble comes, the community will stand behind him, just as they'd done before. And he learns, he discovers that it's not the case, that nobody stands behind him, not even his new bride will stand with him. And they have a variety of reasons and excuses and rationales. Carl got his subpoena in June of 1951.
Carl Foreman, the
screenwriter and the basic creator of the film. He gets a subpoena. He quit he'd been in the Communist Party in the late 30s and early 40s. He kind of knew this was coming, and because he was getting a much higher profile in Hollywood. He was a successful screenwriter. And then, after he gets the subpoena, he lets his business partners and his friends know about it. And he can't help but notice that people are beginning to pull away from him. They're encouraging him to cooperate with the committee. But they're also warning him about what would happen. And he feels a sense of betrayal, and as he starts dealing with this, he starts writing this into the script. And you see a couple of specific places where it's clear where this is going. And so, and one of the basic dilemmas here, Karl didn't want to be a political martyr. I mean, his career was just taking off. He was making good money, doing the things he loved, getting a big high profile in Hollywood. And the last thing he wanted to do was get blacklisted. And so the marshal, he begins to identify with the marshal. The marshal's just gotten married that morning and, in theory, retired from his job on a Sunday morning when he gets the telegram saying his nemesis is coming back to town to kill him, and there are 3 armed killers out there already waiting for him. And the marshal doesn't want to face these guys by himself. He tries to run everything he can to round up a big crew to dominate, but they won't. And in the end, it's just him. And he would just love to get on the buckboard with his beautiful young bride, Grace Kelly, and get out of town. But he can't. And in the same way, Karl felt he couldn't do what the committee insisted. He knew it wouldn't be enough just to say, hey, okay, I was once in the party. Big mistake. I'm really sorry. Let's move on, guys. They would require him to name names, to accuse other people, friends, former comrades, of being subversives. That was the only way he was going to get out from this. And, you know, I think he was tempted to do it, but he just couldn't do it. And so this reluctant martyr, this reluctant form of courage is what the marshal and Karl share. And I happen to think it's a kind of a very American. We think of ourselves that way. Well, we don't want to, you know, take up violence. We don't want to oppose Saddam Hussein or whatever it is. But, you know, we don't have a choice. In the end, we have to do what Americans do, which is stand up, you know, and take the chances. And I think that's really what resonates about it. And I think that's really what Karl was trying to get at.
So it's, in a sense, it reminds Americans about the type of Americans they want to be.
That they want to be. I'm not sure they're the type we are. We're talking now, we're in the world of myth.
Right.
Adam, I mean, you know, we're in self-image. We're in the things we tell ourselves about ourselves, or maybe the things we tell our children about ourselves.
Yeah. In our hopes, we're Will Kane, but maybe in reality, we're
the citizens of Hadleyville, who kind of make up excuses. The great scene where it really comes out is in the church. The marshal storms in there halfway through, interrupts the service, and asks for help. He explains to this congregation full of the upright faith citizens of the community, including the mayor and other members of the town council, what the situation is. And they hem and haw about it. The mayor gets up and talks about it, and finally they ask the reverend, what do you think we should do? And he hems and haws. And he basically says, well, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, you know, that we need to oppose evil, but if you're asking me if it's okay to send people out to maybe die, kill or be killed, well, I don't know what to say. He's punting, basically, punting it away. So church lets him down. And state lets him down, because the mayor then gets up and gives this wonderfully hypocritical speech saying what a great guy the marshal is and all the great things he's done for town. And by the way, I think he should get out of town now. And so that's where the critique really is. I think there is a leftist critique in High Noon about the moral corruption of this bourgeois community and its failure to stand up for its principles when the time comes. And that's where you see it deeply, right in that one scene.
Well, Glenn Frankel is the author of High Noon, the Hollywood Blacklist, and the Making of an American Classic.
Pick up wrap your tongue around it.
It's a great title. No, it's great. It's great. You know, and I think especially right now, as we already mentioned, it has a special amount of, for better for worse, resonance. And on another level, Gary Cooper seems to be making a comeback of himself. I think every so often we kind of come back to certain icons and look at their careers in a little bit more a nuanced way, or at a new way, a new perspective a little bit. He's been gone since 1961, and, you know, it's a good opportunity now to kind of look also at his body of work, too. Was he just sort of a Hollywood charismatic leading man, or did he really have chops, etc.? You know, see High Noon and judge for yourself, and read Glenn's book. It was a very enjoyable read, by the way. So
thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Adam. Nice to talk to you.
Same here. When you come back with your next book, we'll talk again, I hope.
Okay.
Steven Bernstein is very, very celebrated cinematographer. I'm going to name just some of his films here. Just the unusual diversity of his filmography alone is pretty impressive. In 1992, Like Water for Chocolate, Okay. Kicking and Screaming for Noah Baumbach in 1995. He went on to quite a few films, but he did The Waterboy with Adam Sandler in 98, Scary Movie 2 in 2001, Corky Romano 2001, but Monster, I think, was the enormous breakout film that he is, I guess, can sort of be one of the most films that he's most proud of. And that came out in 2003. And he followed that up, believe it or not, with White Chicks, okay, in 2004. So this is a guy who goes between really independent films and then Hollywood films back and forth. He's also a director, and I wanted to point out that he has a couple of films under his belt, including a film called Decoding Annie Parker and a new one coming out called Dominion. So I hope to bring him back with his director hat on soon. Okay, so Steven Bernstein is also teaching classes about filmmaking. If you visit somebodystudios.com/seminars, you'll learn all about it. And he will talk about it on this upcoming segment. Right now, my conversation with cinematographer, filmmaker, actor, bon vivant, entertaining, overall, and engaging fellow, Mr. Steven Bernstein, here on FilmWax Radio. Well, it's very nice to meet you, Steven Bernstein.
Very nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. Steve, where'd you grow up?
Well, I was born in Buffalo, in upstate New York, but I spent a large part of my life in the United Kingdom, mostly in London.
Why was that?
I moved there.
Oh, okay.
And
as a
got some
7-year-old, you moved to London.
Yeah, and got some training there. Worked at the BBC for a long time. They gave me some great training, really more as a writer and director than as a cinematographer, but that too. And then, we came to the phenomena that was music videos in the 1980s, and somebody needed somebody with a camera. I had one. Someone needed somebody with some experience of lighting some sets. I had that. And somebody needed somebody who would work for free, and I was willing to do that as well. And we shot what became known as music videos, and then no one really knew what they were, except they were aged to help bands sign with what were called A&R men at record companies. Yeah. And we shot some. They became kind of important. I went on to shoot some major bands, and that led to commercials and my work with Tony Kaye and winning a Cannes Golden Lion and the D&D Award, and that led to features, and that's how it all started that long time ago.
Oh, just so you know, I just like to get a little bit of context, so,
Sure.
And so when I ask you about, like, the past, it's all for, my bigger plan.
I'm there with you. Any details you want, for what I remember, I will share, and what I don't remember, I will make up.
Okay, I'm sure I won't be able to tell the difference.
I hope not.
So the UK period, I guess those were your informative young years. And how did, though, working in the UK and coming up under the British school, how does that inform you as a film professional, as a cinematographer and a filmmaker?
That's a great question. I've not been asked that before, and I think it goes to some very important issues. The BBC has a very structured and formal educational system, and they, with great success, trained generation upon generation of directors, writers, producers, lighting cameramen, as they were then called, in a particular orthodoxy, a single proper way of doing things. And whether that way is correct or not, or is limited in some respects or not, it gives you a good foundation and an understanding that really whatever problem is presented to you, there is a simple, ordered, structured solution to it. Mm-hmm. What that subsequently allows you to do is become more of an iconoclast, where you say, okay, I know that whatever set I'm put on, I'm safe. I understand certain fundamentals that have been drilled into me. But now if I want to depart from that, and possibly radically depart from it, I feel comfortable enough with my technical understanding that I can make that departure. So the paradox of the British system, and I would say it extends beyond the BBC to boarding schools, what we call public schools, to the university system, is that it's so regimented and formal and so very thorough in its foundations that it actually engenders more radical approaches because people feel comfortable within themselves to push the boat out and test the boundaries of those limitations and take radical and new approaches to the art, be it in cinematography, in writing, in directing. So in England, you have these two parallel sensibilities, the formal, regimented ones and the revolutionary ones that are reacting against their regimentation, but both finding their foundation in the basis of good primary education in all these different areas.
Was transitioning back to the States something that was difficult, or?
Well, again, a great question. It was more difficult than I imagined. The sensibilities, Churchill's line, which is two people divided by a common language, I think is true. I had got used to the British way of doing things, and I like Los Angeles, but it is in many respects very much the Wild West. And particularly when you are working on projects as a freelancer, you always have to determine which project is real and which isn't. But the presumption always has to be that everything is real because you don't want to be rude to the person who potentially may be giving you tens of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or whatever it is, if you're a DP or if you're a director, it's millions of dollars. So you're sort of courteous to everybody. And there's a way of making films in Los Angeles. A lot of people practice. You start with a great lie. You've signed Brad Pitt, and you're now looking for other casts. You approach another actor or cinematographer, say, hey, do you want to shoot a Brad Pitt film? You say, sure. And they do that 10 or 15 times, and suddenly they have 14 actors and a cinematographer and a production designer all coming to work on a Brad Pitt film in which Brad Pitt will never appear. The idea is that creates a momentum, or so they believe, and they don't call it lying, they call it positive thinking. And the belief is that if you get enough people believing the same thing, however false the original narrative, then it will come to occur. Ironically, there was the film Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I think that's kind of the view in Los Angeles. If you lie about it, it will happen. So I was unprepared for that. I was naive. I believed a lot of what what was told, and I would take meeting upon meeting upon meeting with would-be producers who wanted to hire the cinematographer who shot like Water for Chocolate, and a lot of those films would never occur. So in that sense, the transition was very difficult, but I adapted over time.
But everybody else was in, pardon the way I'm phrasing it, but everybody else was in on it. They understood, or just about everybody else, I assume, understood how the game was played. You were the one at a loss, and you were probably telling people how you were going to be working on a Brad Pitt movie, and it was probably embarrassing, I imagine, if not frustrating.
Oh, unbelievable. The thing is, everyone thinks everyone in Los Angeles is a liar. In fact, I think there's only a small group of people actually lying. But because they've told big lies to many people, all the people who repeat the lie become de facto liars once removed. Right. So you may not intend to lie, but you end up lying because you're repeating something you were told that wasn't true. So it's a fascinating thing. And I don't know if other people were any less naive than I am, or even if it's wholly to do with naivete. You have to run with these things because you just don't know if that unscrupulous producer may in the end actually put together a project. Right. And if they do, you want to make sure that you're there. So they're lying. They know they're lying. But the one thing you must never say to a producer is, you're lying.
And then you're off in Joseph Heller territory. Well, absurdist,
exactly.
Absurdist.
Or Kafka.
Kafka is a even better reference. And then you mentioned, just kind of curious, you mentioned when you were starting to make music videos, if you remember maybe a couple of examples of like some of the artists you worked with, maybe that at the time, maybe they weren't even signed yet, or no, they were obviously signed because they were producing music videos at that time.
Well, no, a lot of them, they might be signed. Sometimes they'd be doing music videos in the hopes of finding a band. I mean, one of bands we worked with early is the Boomtown Rats, Bob Geldorf, and Geldorf then went on to do Band Aid and so on, and we did a small video with him, and saw great things. Cyndi Lauper became big, of course, later. I think she was on her way then. Paul McCartney, who was in this band called
I don't remember.
It escapes me now. But four guys, and all that. So there are lots of very, very big bands, and it was a spectacular time. Creatively, it was really interesting as well, because it's not just that the bands were getting discovered and we were at the cutting edge then, and that's great opportunities for me. It was the idea that you really had lots of money to experiment, because really, what I used to say then, there's no mistakes in a music video, only motifs. Mm-hmm. So you could pretty much experiment with anything you wanted, and it would be considered interesting later. If you knew David Sylvian, who was in a band called Japan, we did a video where I thought it would be cool, or the director and I thought it would be cool, if we shot it out of focus. And not just a little bit out of focus, but everything completely and utterly out of focus from beginning to end. Wow. So you can imagine how delighted the record company was that you could really not see the artist at anything except this sort of a wonderful orange and blue haze that I had created with my back.
You're hoping you might be on some sort of enhancers or something, which might actually make you see it straight. Or
we should have said that was a requirement. But here's the crazy thing. The video became incredibly popular. I think it won some awards. And within 6 months, everybody was shooting everything out of focus. Right. And, so that's what I mean. No mistakes, only motifs. But what a great period of experimentation and expansion, for an artist at that time.
I think you mentioned before the difference, the monetary difference between being a cinematographer, and I'm assuming, and maybe incorrectly, that maybe doing videos really cemented you as a cinematographer. If you knew that there was a larger financial reward for being a director, what compelled you to pursue being a cinematographer? Was it simply the momentum that was built, and you were all of a sudden getting a lot of calls?
You have some great insights, and it is a great question. It goes to everything that is me, and all of the above would be my answer to that. The reason I became a cinematographer, or continue to be cinematographer, because of the momentum. Once I had done some videos, other people wanted to hire me. Then I was working with Tony Kaye. We did a very famous ad in the UK for British Solid Fuel with a dog, a cat, and a mouse. Then everybody wanted to hire me. I was going from commercials company to commercials company, and then all those video directors were then moving into drama. They would pull me along, with them, and that's what happened. But as to your more fundamental questions, why I wasn't a director, it's because I had seen a lot of my friends working in independent films and music videos, for that matter, suffering mightily as a director. A director, if they're lucky, gets to actually exercise their craft or their art about every 4 or 5 years on a feature, maybe more, maybe less, but something like that. If you do episodic television, you don't get to do a lot of creative input because the characters are pretty much established already, and you're more or less a traffic cop. And no disrespect to lots of fantastic episodic directors I've worked with who do sometimes work on better quality shows, but very often the actors know by episode 3 who they are, what the arcs are, and you don't have a chance as a director to really have a lot of creative input the way you would on a feature. But who wants to only work every 4 years with no guarantee that at the end of that 4 years you'll be working, or that you'll even make very much money? And I don't mean to jump ahead, but when I moved from cinematographer to director, I did a film that I wrote with my son called Decoding Annie Parker.
Starring the great Larry Pine. I kid, but I was looking through the cast, and it was funny to see his name there. But
a great actor, but also Samantha Morton, Helen Hunt, Rashida Jones, Corey Stoll, Aaron Paul, but And Mr. Pine was a great actor, but it was the transition. And I shot Monster, which had won the Oscar. Things were going well. I worked on SWAT, did all the big second unit action stuff for that, which was great. And Clark Peterson, who was the producer of Monster, knew that I had written a book about film production, knew that I had shot lots of films by that stage, knew that I was a writer because I'd written a lot of stage stuff as well, and said, Steven, you really should do your own film now. Time to stop avoiding properly directing. And I made that choice with his support. We went looking for money. We thought we had it. And I announced rather boldly that I was giving up cinematography. Then the money we thought we had turned out to be, I think, contingent on of signing someone like of the level of Julia Roberts to like a $2 million movie. So that wasn't going to happen. And I decided I was going to stick with it. I stuck with it for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Not a penny coming in. Everything I had saved was lost. Virtually every possession I had in the world was gone. I was living in abject poverty. So what I had thought would happen to directors if I had chosen, or me as a director if I had chosen to direct, happened. And I lost everything I had accumulated as a cinematographer. And I remember when finally, magically, we got the money for the film and the script went around to the agents and the agents responded and we got this incredible cast. I mean, Helen Hunt's won 2 Oscars now, I think, or won one and been nominated for another. Samantha Morton was nominated for 2. Aaron Paul won the Emmy. Great cast. And they responded to the script and we had a great time making the film. But on day 3 of the shoot, Samantha and I were talking, went into the early evening. She went off in her car. I went off in mine. And I had forgotten that I hadn't put gas in it in the morning. So I stopped at the gas station. We were shooting out in Whittier, California, about an hour from where I lived. I knew that I would never get home with the gas I had. And I went to the petrol pump. The gas pump. Everyone had left. It's 1:30. And I tried to use my credit card, and it was rejected. There was no money left. I borrowed money from a stranger who doesn't believe I'm a director. Later, I invite her to the set. She actually comes, amazed to see there's actually a film there, and I was telling the truth. She thought she was going to give me $5 because I was obviously a homeless person that had a great story. But it turned out that I was a homeless person, but I was directing a film. So it was satisfying to see her there. But it goes to what you were asking earlier about why be a cinematographer and a director. Directing is scary. If you're working, you're working. But if you're not, it can be a very long way. As a cinematographer, if you're experienced and you've got a good resume and a good show reel, you can work pretty steadily if you want to, and I was. But directing, much harder. And then your success depends on the success of your last movie. So a much harder occupation, but ultimately for me, because of my interest in writing and actors, I would say slightly more satisfying.
Makes a lot of sense, actually. I hear from a lot of people that I talk to that, it's nice when they get to that point where they can create one movie for Hollywood for more commercial ends, and then maybe every so often a project that's very personal and maybe that doesn't really have any money and they're not going to have to make very much. I don't know. I was just looking also through the films that you have worked on, and some of them, obviously early on you worked on, you shot like Water for Chocolate, you shot Kicking and Screaming which I think was Noah Baumbach's maybe his first feature.
It was. I specialized with first-time directors because I had a background in writing and directing. I could communicate with them, and I was considered a gentle soul. So I did Noah Baumbach's first film. I think I did Jon Favreau's first drama. It was a TV pilot. And I did a second one as well. I did Noah's second movie. And I did Patty Jenkins' first movie, which was Monster. And, of course, Patty just directed Wonder Woman. So I seem to be having some good luck. Meanwhile, Noah was in Cannes, having great success with his new film, working with Adam Sandler, whose films I also shot. So it was a good week for me last week.
And you've been around a while now, so it's going to happen, right? But that's an amazing thing. Yeah. With the other part of that, just the coincidence, or let's just say the circularity of Patty now being the director of Wonder Woman, which has turned out to be a real enormous success. She hadn't been directing in some time, isn't that true?
Well, Patty is a person of a rare thing in here, which of absolute integrity. So Patty chooses when to direct and when not to, because Monster was such a phenomenal success. And going back to the theme that you and I have been discussing a little bit, which is how hard directing is. When Monster was finished, nobody would buy it. Nobody would buy it. It was a little, I know it says $7 million IMDb. I promise it was a $3 million film. And it was difficult to make, and the heat and humidity of central Florida. And they did the cut. They showed it to everybody. No one would purchase it. Blockbuster eventually made them a deal, but it wasn't a great deal. And Patty and Charlize and Clark and Brad Whitman, the other producer, all begged for it to get at least a limited theatrical. And they didn't want to do it. And I think they all had to give up either money or points to achieve it. Shown, I think, in one cinema in New York, one in Los Angeles. It got incredible reviews. That expanded to 10 cinemas, 20, 50, 100. I think it got over 700 screens. And I think when you count DVD and foreign, I think that little $3 million film has made over $100 million now. Don't quote me, but it's something around that. So that's a remarkable story, but imagine how stressful it was for Patty to have put all that time and effort, all those years of work, and then be told at the end of months of trying to sell the film that no one would buy it, and only a video company was willing to buy it, probably with the intention of having it go straight to video. To go from that to Wonder Woman, to one of the nicest people, and people with greatest integrity and strength, by the way, in the industry is great to see. But right after that, Patty was offered lots of projects. But she wanted to do a film about Chuck Yeager, the test pilot, and she stuck with that and with her vision, and she would not take the easy and proffered money. She decided she was going to do what she believed in. Then I think a TV pilot came along for The Killing, which she was really attracted to. She did that. And then Wonder Woman, which is about a strong woman that Patty felt that she could fully realize and was something that was important to her. But Patty picks and chooses because she not only talks the talk, but walks the talk and acts with integrity and does projects she believes in.
I guess I was making a reference before about, you're doing one for them and one for you, that adage, because I see, like, even Monster was sort of sandwiched in between Scary Movie 2, which I assume had a very, very big budget off the success of the first one, and Corky Romano, which was a big commercial Hollywood comedy, I guess, and then you do Monster, and then you do White Chicks, and I was wondering if that was your approach to it, or you were really just taking things that would challenge you and that would take you maybe into new experiences. I was just kind of wondering, because you usually it's easier to peg somebody by looking at the movies they make. You're a little harder to do that with.
Yeah, and it was always great when I'd be sitting in an interview and I'd have someone looking at my resume and they'd start going, "Oh, Noah Baumbach," and they would, they would think for a moment, and then along came, Waterboy or Corky Romano, and their eyebrows would lift, and then it would be Monster, and they would frown again, and by the time they got to the bottom of the resume, they would sort of look up and say, "I have no idea what you can do, who you are, or how you make your decisions." I did have a plan. It would be presumptuous to say that I followed through on the plan. I did always want to do both. I wanted to do independent films because I love independent films. I love the camaraderie of a small set. I love the integrity of vision that those directors have. And I wanted to support myself and my family by doing studio films. Look, to be honest, I was shooting the giant second unit on SWAT, where I had, I think, 22 or 23 cameras when we were blowing up the front of the LA Library, when we were crashing planes on the 3rd Street Bridge, when we were blowing up cars with bazookas downtown. I think it was 23 cameras. And a huge unit and an enormous number of stunt people. Everything you would think a cinematographer would want, but, I was losing interest. It was becoming like a very well-paid factory job. And the call for Monster came while I was still engaged on that giant second unit. And I asked for permission to go. I was working with my dear friend Gabrielle Bernstein, who was the principal cinematographer. And they said, "If you believe in this project, go and do it." And it was a huge, about a 90% cut in wages. And all the comforts and trailers and mechanisms that we had available to us in Los Angeles, to one camera, and a small crew and a lot of un-air-conditioned sets, it was a very big change. So yeah, in part, it was stimulating. It was a new challenge. In part, it helped me look again at what I wanted to do. And when I looked at the integrity of Patty and Charlize and Christina and everybody else working the film, I decided that I did still love film, and I still wanted to do it. There's a great story, if you don't mind me digressing slightly from Monster. One day, it was the big farewell scene between Charlize and Christina when she's sending Christina off to get away from all the madness. And these are two people, monsters though they may be, who loved each other. And that's the theme that Patty was pursuing. And they had to say goodbye to each other. It was a very emotional scene. They were both going to cry. And, crews can be rough and tumble. And this was a good crew, and some of us were rough and tumble and some weren't. But remarkably, the crew just had a sense that these two actresses, these two friends of ours, these two women, were working very hard to get to an emotional place. And spontaneously, everyone began to not talk. And we were using hand signals. And there's a little bit of whispering, and even that stopped, to the point that the whole set for the entire shooting day was entirely silent to help these two actresses find their moment, their truth, the relationship of these two characters. Now, how often does that happen on a film set? When does it happen on a studio film? It happened on this independent film, and it was one of the most singular and remarkable things I've ever seen on any film set anywhere. And it happened on a little $3 million movie. So I guess that's why I was bouncing backwards and forwards. And the other thing is I've got a good technical foundation. People like my action photography and so on. But, I've got a background in literature and writing, so I can speak to the Patty Jenkins and the Noah Baumbachs and the Jon Favreaus of the world, the intellectual filmmakers. I can talk to them about film history and literary history and theatrical history, and there's a comfort level they feel with me, just as big action directors feel comfortable with me blowing up some cars or a bridge or a plane or a library.
Well, maybe it's that same ability to communicate and the satisfaction you get from it that led you to what seems like maybe your most recent work, which is these seminars you're now doing, right? Or is it fair to call them seminars or classes?
Yeah, they're seminars. Look, I did a film with these all lead into each other, but yeah, I did a film with John Malkovich called Dominion, which is coming out later this year, and based on a play of mine about the poet Dylan Thomas. Very, very literary, and to me, it's the culmination of everything that I've been doing till now. But I began to recognize that I have some different approaches to filmmaking because I find that my directing is informed by my background as a cinematographer. Mm-hmm. My writing is informed by my background as a director and as a cinematographer and as an actor, because I've done some acting as well. And I realized that I've had the benefit of approaching the same problems that all filmmakers approach, but from different sides of the equation. I've seen the issue of time approached as a director and as a cinematographer. I've understood the atmosphere, like the silence I was talking about, a monster that's necessary to get great performance. So I thought that wouldn't it be great if I could say to people, look, if you're a writer and you want to know what it's like on a set and what a director or an actor or a cinematographer needs to know, how you can make the best possible film, let me tell you what you need to know as a writer. As a director, if you want to know what a writer's thinking when they write a scene and what a cinematographer needs to know from you, here's that information. So I run these seminars to use ordinary language to take complex ideas and make them simple for people who wouldn't otherwise understand these notions.
How frequently do you teach the seminars, and how would somebody who's interested find out about it? How would they learn more?
Well, we've just launched them. The subscriptions are going a bit ballistic or mad. A lot of things have filled up or virtually filled up. I think there's still spaces in most of them. It's the first one, really. I've been teaching for over 20 years at different places. I taught at USC. I taught at the International Film School in London. I've set up film programs in London and New Brunswick. So I've taught these same courses hundreds of times. They've just gotten better and better and nuanced. But this is the first time, and maybe the only time, I don't know, that we're going to offer it online. It starts in July. There's we've got another one that we're running live here in August. Where are we? We're in June. Sorry. And then they're going to be available online for the entire month of July. There's 6 different courses, and it's at a thing called, if I can say the website, it's called somebodystudios.com, and you can see all the seminars there. And if you're in Los Angeles, you can come to the live ones, which are also listed there. So we're going to record them live, make them available for, I think, 30 days, and then the person could sign up and take one or all of the different seminars. And it's my radical approaches to screenwriting based on my experience on set, my radical approaches to understanding lighting for people who aren't cinematographers, and then the actor to have a better technical understanding of what it's like to come on a film set for the first time. I'm just trying to help everybody understand everybody else's ideas so they feel more comfortable on a film set or writing for a film set.
And that website again is somebody's seminar?
Oh, it's Somebody Studios.
somebodystudios.com.
And then once you get to that site, just look for seminars, and they'll all be there.
Well, this has been terrific, and I'm looking forward to maybe having you in New York later in the year when Dominion comes out. Hopefully you'll have a reason to come out east.
We have a couple. I've got a client there. I'm writing several scripts, so I plan to be coming out to New York soon, and I'll certainly come out when the film's released. So it'd be great to talk to you again. There's so much I want to say. It was an interesting conversation.
Oh, I know.
There's so many topics we touched on that we can go into greater detail. Sure.
You have such an illustrious. You really have such a long career.
Sure.
And did you stay in touch with the woman who gave you the $5?
We did. And we had a premiere for Decutting Annie Parker at the DGA, the Directors Guild of America, on Sunset in Los Angeles. And I sent her an invitation, and I didn't see her RSVP. And we sold out both theaters at the DGA. And DGA is a very prestigious theater. And for me, my first film was a very big moment to see all those people. And I looked out on those faces of friends, benefactors, detractors, people who knew me as a cinematographer, people who knew me from my book, people who knew me from courses I had taught, all the summation of my life in a sea of faces at the Directors Guild of America. But then I looked up and I saw at the back a woman smiling very proudly with almost a motherly pride, and there she was. So it was a great moment, and I felt somehow vindicated, and I hope she felt it was $5 well spent.
Steven Bernstein is the cinematographer, filmmaker, director, a screenwriter, author. I mean, you are a true Renaissance man and teacher as well. And I look forward to, again, part 2 would be great. One of the next visits, if not for the release of Dominion, some other time. But when you come into New York, I'm sure we could grab some more time, and I think it would be time well spent. So
thank you very much. Great pleasure speaking to you. And anytime you want to speak, I'm happy. These are great topics. Thanks.
I had a great time. Thanks, Stephen, and thank your team over there too for their help.
I will. Very appreciative. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. My name is Adam Shartoff. You're listening to FilmWax Radio, presented by Rooftop Films. Until the next time, take care of yourself, the ones you love.